it is truly a privilege to have worked with and met all the people that are involved in this project, this album, but we just have a loving spot in our hearts for Peter Razor, and I tell you, so we met him when he was a young man in his mid-80s, you know. Quite a few years ago now when you actually interviewed him. And we keep finding out things about him. He's such a beautiful, unassuming, unpretentious person, you know. We keep, you know, we know him a year or two, and somebody will say, you know, I mean, he won a bronze star in Korea. We go, oh, really? No, you know, hey, Peter, tell us about that bronze star. He said, oh, you know, they were just passing them out one day. and then, you know, another year goes by, and we find out, no, he won 3 bronze stars. It's true.
So,
and it goes on. He's a hoop dancer. He was a wood carver. All these things we do. I mean, major stuff.
Well, Peter grew up at the Minnesota State Orphanage in Owatonna, Minnesota, and here are boys from his class in front of the school. That's the school, right, Peter? This picture.
Yeah.
And you can see we blew up the picture of him. There he is. He's so cute. And so the state orphanage, Curtis and I first met him because that building now, or the main orphanage building is now a government building and
Art Center,
and an Owatonna Art Center in there, and we've done concerts there before, and there's also a museum in the back rooms. And I was looking at all that stuff one day, and I said, what is this? And they said, well, this used to be an orphanage. And so I started talking to another man, Harvey Ronglin, and both Peter. I interviewed both of them and wrote songs about them, about their growing up there, and it was really tough. Peter grew up there in the 30s and 40s, and it was a rather loveless upbringing. They lived in cottages. They called them cottages, but they were more like barracks in these buildings around the big building. And there would be one matron and an assistant for like 35 kids. So there's really not much adult role model, and it really depended on the matron you had. Some of them were very, very abusive, which was legal back then. And besides that, Peter is also Native American. Was very, very tough. He got a lot of extra beatings for that, which is unbelievable.
But he arrived as a baby. His story is amazing,
yeah.
And he has his book back there.
So,
but we'll do a kind of a synopsis. Is that a word?
Synopsis. Yeah, the whole song is
a song.
Yeah, story of what the things he went through. And so here, after I wrote the song, and Peter's a writer too, because his book is back there, and so he helped me rewrite his song. After I was done with it, I came and he said, oh no, this has got to get changed. And so we are working on his song later on.
You know,
well, we'll talk about her in a second. What were you going to say, Chris?
The one thing that we actually have talked to a lot of the orphans, and most of them are in their 80s and 90s now that we've talked to, and they'll say it was pretty rough, but all of them also say, well, you know, at least we got to go to school, we had food to eat, and, you know.
Especially during the Depression, they had, you know, food, clothes, education, and but not much love. And so at the age of 15, he was placed on a farm. A lot of the boys would be placed on farms, farm indenture. And the first farmer he was placed with was very, very abusive. Peter was almost killed. And this is the second family that he was placed with. This is a reunion he had with the farm wife. The gentleman has passed on, the farmer, the husband. But they took him in, and he worked on their farm, and they turned his life around. He said, they were so nice. He said, I decided to be like them. And I'll never forget that line when he told me that.
He was real suspicious at first.
Yeah, why would they be so nice?
It's like, what is this?
So this is a couple years ago. We got to meet her too. This is Pat Klug in Caledonia, Minnesota. Oh, and here's his hoop dancing. We saw this picture on his wall at his house one day, and we said, is this you? He said, oh yeah, I did a little hoop dancing. Yikes. That looks pretty difficult to me.
We keep finding things out about Peter. He's an amazing son.
Yeah, and there he is with his book. That was at our CD release concert in Minneapolis. And this is the first day we met him when we went to interview him. He lives near Tomah. And this is at the CD release concert where he was up talking to the audience on stage. And he'll talk to us. After this song, we're going to just take about 5 minutes to kind of reset the mics up here. And after the song, we'll get Peter up here to talk to us.
So if anybody needs to take care of anything, that would be a good time.
But also, you don't want to go too far because we're going to have the drawing for his book and one of our CDs during that little 5-minute break.
So those of you who can draw, get ready.
Oh no, I can't be in a thing because I can't draw at all. A stick man, how about a stick man?
I'll give it a 2.5. Okay.
We didn't really talk about the instruments, but real quickly I'll tell you this is a Celtic harp or a folk harp, a little smaller than the big concert harps you see. And this is the type of harp they play in Ireland, Scotland, and Wales.
This is a mandolin cello, a mandocello. Mandolins are tuned like violins, and back at the turn of the century, this was made in 1914. They all correspond to the violin family, cello. This is Peter's song.
Where the North Wind Blows. In the tiny closet, he sat on the cold floor. He heard the other kids play through a vent low on the door. Long hours in the darkness, his knees tight to his chest. Dear Miss Munson, let him out. Now you behave, and you get right to bed. Peter was abandoned in 1929. A boarding house in St. Paul found a baby left behind. They sent this little Native American baby to Owatonna, an orphanage. It was called the State School. Peter got a letter when he was about 10. It held $1 and a big surprise for him. It said, I am your grandma, it's way up north I am, near the reservation. He read it over and over again. Two more letters came then and 2 more dollar bills, but it came to a quick end, never heard from her again. His files have a letter from her to the state school. I'd like to raise my grandson, but they said no, and Peter never knew.
In the library, there's a map that shows where my grandma lives, where the north wind blows. After lights were put out, you must not leave your bed. But Peter was so thirsty, he ran for a drink instead. He heard Miss Munson's footsteps, he doubled up in bed. And then he saw the hammer. It struck his arms, his right knee, cap his chest. He hid all his bruises and walked with a bad limp. He scrubbed the floor on his knees and infection set right in. The nurse asked what happened, but he dare not speak. The only thing his files say is infection, hospital for 6 weeks. Weeding in the garden, he cut a bean off by mistake. So Mr. Beatty kicked him in the dirt there Peter lay. He screamed, you dirty Injun, and kicked him in the chest. The state school records say he is a loner, he keeps to himself. Peter and his 2 friends ran off one July night. They hopped a northbound freight train to find Grandma a new life. They rode and then they walked for a week, but they were caught. Never found the reservation. They did not find his grandma. In the library, there's a map that shows where my grandma lives, where the north wind blows.
They placed him on a farm when he turned 15. The farmer took his own life, attacked Peter all the time. One night in drunken rage, a piece of wood raised high. He hit Peter in the head. He was knocked out cold by the woodpile. When he finally woke up, he wondered would he die. They left him in the cold November night. He crawled out to the highway and flagged down a ride. His social worker's records say he liked it there, and they were so kind. When he was recovered, he went to Lee Klug's farm. The couple spoke so softly, he thought, why are they so warm? It was a new beginning, could have gone either way. But he chose to be like them, so kind and thoughtful, it was just the way. Peter keeps on working to keep the ghosts at bay. He wrote his own memoir to release his early days. He joined the Fond du Lac band of Ojibwe. He has a loving family, and now he tries to let demons fade away.
In the library, there's a map that shows where my grandma lives, where the north wind blows.
Peter Raisin.
All right. Give us just a moment.
Okay, I think we're going to do the drawing. They're about set up. Peter, would you like to draw me? Do you want me to?
Do you want to draw the name for the prize?
Sure. You can draw for your book. So we're going to draw for Peter's book will be the first one. Pick me, Peter. Okay. We have, oh wait, boy, Goldsmith, Priscilla? Loretta, would you like to draw for yours?
Sure.
Okay, here's for the CD.
Okay.
All right.
No, after your birthday, would be a great way
Mary.
to start your
Oh boy.
Strength fight, I'll bet you.
I think it ends in two E's. Glass?
R-A-N-G.
Yeah, just
Starts
No,
with
no,
G.
you. This is yours. You're
Yeah.
Ask her whatever.
Is that you?
Yes, it does. Right?
Wasna?
Okay.
Pronounce it.
Wasna?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, they let her draw one, they let you draw one. Did I get to draw one? I just carry stuff.
Green plastic box.
Have a seat there, sir. I am going to scamper off somewhere. Let's see how you guys say a few things.
Check, check, check. Say hello, Peter, so we
Yeah.
can see it, so we can see if
Be
it's
very,
live.
very, you
Hello?
want to hold, you ready to hold this?
Hello? 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 Okay, I
Check,
guess
check,
it works.
we're good? Okay, so I'm gonna do a formal introduction. Let's give a big welcome to Mr. Peter Raisin. We're so glad to have you here today, Peter. It's always a real treat for us to see him. Do you want to go ahead, or should I?
Yeah, I'll try. I'm just getting organized, you know. I want to thank the library also for having us here, and also the Minnesota Historical Society Press that published my book. They did a good job of editing because I'm not a writer as such. But I started writing after I retired. That's when I wrote this book. And it was quite a struggle to get it organized. My daughters kind of helped me a little bit, mostly with encouragement, because I couldn't figure out who wanted to read this junk. You know? It was very, it was, in my life, my working life was spent in technical stuff. I was a journeyman electrician, an electronic technician. I worked for the state of Wisconsin. And I was a ham radio for a hobby, so everything's technical. Wires and pliers and screwdrivers and hamming was my hobby, because that was a good hobby. Kids get tired of me for a while when I'd be talking to somebody in a foreign country and with code, and they didn't like that necessarily, so I had to wear earphones most of the time when I'm doing that, so I didn't bother the family. But I did that for 30 years. Then I retired, and I started writing. My daughters kept after me to write something about my past, you know. So finally I couldn't do both things. I couldn't write and also do hamming, which is kind of a demanding hobby. So I gave all my equipment to a local amateur radio club, and I started writing seriously.
So can I just ask you, Peter, so did your family have any idea that you'd grown up at this orphanage? Did they have any knowledge of your life before marriage and the kids?
No, they didn't, and I think that's where these questions started coming from. When I started writing, and I was reluctant to resurrect them demons from the past, you know. But we did, and Kathy, she's right here today, and she was kind of persistent about what I was bringing up and writing about. She's reading my progress as I was writing. She was reading the stories and saying, there's something missing here. You're hiding something in this part right over here. So she made me go back and refresh my memory.
And then did memories kind of keep coming more and more as you wrote?
It did. It's like a domino effect. All my adult life, I never mentioned the state school to nobody. Children, wife, nobody. I sort of put it in the back of my head and forgot about it. I thought I forgot about it. But then it was kind of, it finally started to materialize, and we contacted the Minnesota Historical Society Press, and they said, we'd like to have it in our reading room. But Kathy, she just graduated from university, and she said that, well, it looks, what I've seen so far, it looks like it's going to go a lot further than just a reading room.
Was that for like unpublished manuscripts, the reading room? So she wanted to be a real published book.
Yeah, and again, I countered that, well, who's going to read this junk, you know? I didn't really think that was fodder for the literate public. But anyhow, we kept working on it, and I finally did it, and lo and behold, I won the award on it.
You won the book for the Minnesota the Minnesota Book Award in 2002, is that right?
Yeah, it was the Humanities was running that program at that time.
And can I ask you, Peter, in writing the book, did that help you get rid of any of those demons? Did it help you feel any better about your past?
Well, I didn't realize it at the time because it was quite a chore to go through it, but I haven't read my book since it's been published.
Yeah.
But I think I should read it now. When you get older, you get old enough, something you forgot about for 20 years, you can suddenly read it like it's a brand new book.
Can we talk about the state school some? Some of your memories from there about, or did you have something else you were gonna say about that?
Yeah, it was just, the state school was an institution. Everybody knew where their stall was, you know. This is where you sit in the basement. Everybody had a little seat that had a cover lifted up, and you put your clothes and stuff inside the box, and when you, depending on what you, for winter or summer. And it was very organized, very strict, institutional life. You go to school, you eat on time. If you get sick, you go to our own hospital there, and so it's really quite an organized system, almost military in effect. There was a senator came down from St. Paul in 1910, I think it was, and he studied the state school. It had been in effect for 15, 20 years by then. And he said, I fear we've created a penal institution for innocent children. And I'll agree with that, because I went there in 1930 and I stayed there till 1944. Well, actually, 44, yeah, then I went on farm indenture for 2 more years, but I was still a state ward. Even on farm indenture, I was still a ward of the state.
So did it feel like living in a prison?
Yeah, it did, yeah. I spent 2 years in the Army, and the biggest difference between the Army and the state school was that state school was divide and conquer. And 2 boys, if they got in similar kind of trouble, they divided them in different cottages and split them up, and you couldn't do anything untoward as far as the system was concerned, or else they'd put you in some kind of a different system, in a different cottage right away or anything. You separate you. So it was, in the Army, you have to work like a team. You got to be a team effort. Well, I didn't know anything about team effort, so I didn't work too good at that. But the state school was quite a, some of the boys and girls did all right in life. If you didn't spend too many years there at one time, you probably could get along in life all right. But if you spent most of your childhood in an institution like that, I think I'd venture that everybody would have a lot of trouble in life.
Because you didn't really learn how to act in society and with a family.
Yes,
I know Harvey Rongline has said, yeah, he didn't know how to do anything, like write a check or be with a family. Just he had no idea. Yeah,
that's right. It's very demeaning. It's demeaning in one sense, and if you're a minority, you have another level of danger there. Everybody was treated strictly. They had to conform to a very strict, almost a Spartan type existence. But it was very difficult.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the part where you got the letters. Did you notice in the song he got 2 or 3 letters from his Indian grandma and sent him a $1 bill. And so when you got that first letter, I remember you saying you just couldn't believe it. You didn't know she existed, right? Had you ever heard about her? Did you think you had any family at all anywhere?
Well, I didn't know anything about it. My grandmother from up by Fond du Lac, near the Fond du Lac reservation, in my records that I have back there.
Yeah, he has his records back there. That when the song, I talk about his files, his records, it's this big thing. You got that like when you're in your 70s, right? You got them from the state.
Yeah.
Much later, he got those records, and it has all kinds of things that went on in there. They kept track of everything.
A lot of dominoes to tip over there.
So there's a letter in there. There's a letter from your grandma to the state school saying, "I'd like to adopt and take care of my grandson."
Right, it was,
He never knew that she had written that letter.
yeah, she sent a dollar bill and I didn't know what to do with that. And one of them, and I got 2 letters from her, each with a dollar bill in it, from my Finnish,
From your Indian grandma?
Indian grandma reservation, and my Finnish grandmother sent a letter and said, is my grandson of sound mind?
Oh, she asked. That's in the files, right? But you didn't know about that letter, right? She
No.
wrote that to the orphanage.
Yeah. So
She asked if you were of sound mind.
Yeah, see, my oldest brother was hydrocephalic, disabled. And I come along and I had a large head. It looked like head was too large for my body, and they thought, well, I'm going to be hydrocephalic too. So they abandoned me, and that's where the state got a hold of me. But both families would have been able to take me in if they had the resources. They weren't destitute or anything. So that's what happened. I imagine I'm not the only one. There's probably other things. But I know the minorities were treated pretty badly at the school. One boy, George Lawson, a Negro boy, we called him Negro back then. He was crippled up in the garden almost the same way I was crippled up, by kicking. And I don't know how long he was on recovery, but I was a month in recovery on that one. And his gardener was quite, had a tendency for violence. He was the matron who would have him come down and give us Saturday morning paddlings. And that was quite an experience. Yeah, read the book, it's in there, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when that Mr. Beatty, when he kicked you in the garden, is because you cut a bean off, but you're supposed to be weeding and he cut a bean off by mistake. So that was his excuse to give you a big kick. And then you landed on a whole bunch of other beans, right? You told me? Wiped out a whole bunch of more bean plants, and that was really Mr. Beatty's fault. But then he got really mad.
Yeah, the boy next to me told him, what are you trying to do, because he was a white boy, and he, and when I got done there, he just stomped off, and from there to the cottage usually took about 5 minutes. It took me over half an hour to get there because I was limping, had to rest every few yards.
And no one helped you?
Nobody helped me, no official help. And I told him, the assistant matron wasn't bad at the cottage, but the matron was something else again. But she said, well, Mr. Beatty wouldn't intentionally hurt you, but all I know it hurts, and he did it. So that went on, and they could protect him. When I got a drink of water when I was 11 years old in the cottage 15, and the matron, because I went on the hall where the bubbler was and got it, she come charging in with a hammer in her hand. Didn't see the hammer right away. Started beating me in bed with a hammer.
Because you'd gotten out of bed after lights out. That was the rule.
Yeah.
You couldn't get out of bed, right?
And it was almost a capital offense.
But then there was no one to complain to. You'd be injured, and the people to complain to were the people that were beating you, right?
No, that's right. It's quite a, anyhow, there's one blessing from that one, though. Pretty crippled up for a while, but I spent 6 weeks in the hospital, and that was the best treatment I had out of the 15 years.
Because they were nice to you. The nurses were nice. That makes me want to cry.
So there is some, if you were in a regular school, the teacher might, back then even, they might wrap you with
Right, they did back
a
then.
ruler or something. But if you're whispering across the aisle to other students, in this one instance, the teacher grabbed a yardstick, hardwood yardstick. She come charging down the aisle and said, put your left hand, you don't want to use your right hand because you got to write with that. Put your left hand up and palm open, and she took that thing and she came down, so it was just so ominous coming down, I just couldn't hold my hand there, and I pulled it back. I think I was 10 years old, 11 years old then, and that yardstick broke into 3 or 4 pieces. That's how hard she hit it. And then she didn't say nothing. She just stooped down, picked all the pieces up, and just, it was kind of embarrassing in front of all the other class. And she walked past her own thing and dropped them into her wastebasket, like though it never happened. So we had a lot of that. And one teacher, normally the teachers were pretty good, I thought, except there's these few instances. One teacher told me, get out in the hall because you're being disruptive. I suppose I was talking again. And she out in the hall and wait for me. She told everybody to keep reading, and she followed me out into the hall, and she started, I had a pencil in my hand. She grabbed my shirt here and started slapping me back and forth. And I raised my hand, and there was a pencil there, went right into her hand. And she had to go to the doctor. I didn't intend to do that. It would just happen. So those things happen both ways.
Yeah. So then, then we talked about farm indenture, and the first farmer you were placed with, I just noticed in the song, he was an alcoholic, and he beat Peter, almost killed him one night. But the second family you were with, then after you recovered, remember the picture of the older lady that we saw on the pictures, Mrs. Klug, was Lee and Pat Klug in Caledonia, Minnesota. And didn't you tell us you were suspicious at first? You didn't understand why they were so nice. Like, what were they trying to pull?
Yeah.
That must have been a real different experience. But you finally found out they really just were nice people, right?
Yeah, the first time that he came back from town during a rainy day, I guess they played cards in a bar with other friends.
Oh, he'd been in the bar in town, right?
Yeah, and he came home and I asked his wife, I said, where's Keith? Where is he today? And she said he's up playing in the bar, playing cards with the boys, And so he came home late at night, and I seen the headlights coming. I was in the basement, and I looked out the basement window, and I saw the headlights come into the thing, and how frightening that was. I hadn't been there long enough to know him completely, and I wet my pants.
Because you were so afraid he was going to be drunk and beat you up.
Yeah,
What happened when he did come in?
Yeah, he was he had a big broad smile on his face.
He was fine.
And he said, well, we got to get to chores. And he just was big surprise.
And didn't you say at some point you just decided you wanted to be like them? They were the nicest people you'd met.
Yeah, they were, and they kind of gave me a good start. When I left them, I had 2 years on my own, and I went on, and that's the end. It's the rest of the story, but it's not in the book, but it's what happened. And I went in the Army, and I found out the Army was different than the state school. They're both institutions, but I didn't learn how to be an Army person, so I had a good job in the Army. I got 3 Bronze Stars in Korea. And so it was hard work, though, but I'm used to working because they work you pretty hard at the orphanage, too, and the farmers work you pretty hard, so you learn that part of it.
I wanted to ask you, too, about then, much later, you found out what tribe you belonged to. You realized you belonged to the Fond du Lac Band of Ojibwe, and you joined that. And did that help you in your, I want to say, recovery or how did that help you feel better about your past life?
Yeah, it did. Everything I did helped out. Writing that book was quite helpful.
Yeah, to get it out, to just get it all out in the world.
Yeah, and learning, and I started having successes. You know, you weren't allowed to be successful at the orphanage. As a child, you weren't expected to do anything or be anything. You were supposed to just be a dirty engine, I suppose.
And just be obedient, fall in line, do what you're told. Right?
Yeah. So, but it worked out all right in the end. So
Didn't you say when you joined the tribe, the Fond du Lac, didn't you say that it was like you'd found your family in a way?
it did.
You found where you belonged. That's what you told me.
Yeah, my first kids were born already, and I got a letter from the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Mexico, in Albuquerque. It's some kind of a headquarters there for major information, tribal information. And they sent me a check for 88 cents and another one for $1.26. And finally I called them and I said, "What's these checks for?" And he said, "You have to call Bemidji for that." I said, "Okay." I called Bemidji and he said, "Well, you got to call Fond du Lac." So I called Fond du Lac and he said, "Well, yeah, you belong here." So I said, "Well,
You belong here. Was that nice to hear that? You belong here.
yeah."
I love that.
I never realized it was.
That you belonged anywhere.
Yeah,
Oh.
it wasn't long and I went and visited the reservation and nobody's staring at me like in society, you know.
Right.
It
You
wasn't
fit
too
in.
bad, but
Yeah.
I had just enough finish in me so that I could get along a little bit.
Because your one parent was Finnish and one was,
But the prejudice one, if you were 1/16, they'd notice it.
if you're 1/16th Indian. Do you mind if we
I'm
ask,
half Chippewa, so.
should we ask people, can we open it up and have people ask questions, Peter? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for Peter?
I do.
Yeah, this lady.
Now, if both grandmas sent letters to the state of Minnesota and wanted to take you in, why wouldn't the state let them do that?
This lady asked, why wouldn't the state let either of the grandmas adopt him?
There's a number of things going on that was going on about that time. It wasn't until 1978 that they passed laws that Indian children couldn't be adopted nilly-willy by anybody in the country. Usually if you wanted to adopt an Indian child, you could go there and you adopt them. But they started fighting against that then. But back before that, there was a concerted effort to prevent Indians from getting, if you get an Indian away from somehow get a child away from his Indian roots, you keep him there. You don't let him get back. Because that eventually it would be a death knell for the tribe, you know.
They never told you your grandmother wanted to adopt you.
Yeah, they never.
No,
They never
it's in my
even
record,
know.
but they never told me nothing.
And then the Finnish grandma wrote the letter saying, is he a normal kid? Is he not mentally disabled? But did she, I don't know if she actually said, I want to adopt him. Did she ever?
No, she never.
She never actually asked him. But she did come to visit one time.
Oh, she wanted to take me. My Indian grandmother wanted to take me.
Your Indian mother wanted to, but the Finnish grandmother came with an uncle and his brother just showed up one day and they visited, and that's the only time he ever saw them.
Thank you.
They just said, hi, we're here from Michigan, and then they went away, and that was like a great shock, I believe Peter said, to see them. And he said, I have a brother and another grandma,
Yeah.
or a grandmother. So anyway, but this lady over here has a question.
I actually have a question about when you were writing the book.
Right.
How was it very difficult to go through your 17 years of file, or was it?
Was it difficult to go through those 17 years of memories and the files?
It was like tipping over some. It's like tipping over some a whole stream of dominoes that were not very nice, you know.
Okay.
One memory brings the other next. In fact, I wrote that book before we got our records. I completely wrote one draft of the book. That's when my other daughter said, we got to get those. If they got records, we got to get them. So she's the one that organized.
Was there anything in the records that really surprised you?
Not much. I had done a good job of memory. A couple of instances where dates were changed, you know, some things like that. Hammer attack happened in, when I was 12 or 11, going on 12, and I thought it happened when I was 12, going on 13.
But the hammer attack, it didn't say who attacked you, though. The
Right.
records were just said, oh, he was in the hospital for 6 weeks, had some unknown injuries.
I fell down the steps.
Oh, that was the story of Philip. But you did find out the letter from your grandmother, right? That you didn't know that before. You found out the letter that your Indian grandmother wanted to adopt
Yeah,
you. That was a big surprise.
That's
wasn't
in
it?
my record, yeah.
You didn't know that before.
And the state wasn't real happy about giving you those records, were they?
No, actually they didn't. My daughter said it wasn't too bad. They were kind of happy. In fact, things had changed by the time. See, I'm in my 70s now.
Or in your 90s?
Well, but when you got the records, you were in your 70s, right?
I was in my 70s, but even now it's 20 years later. Ooh.
You're amazing, Peter. I would guess you were 70, and he's not.
So you went to find your grandma, even though you didn't know that she wanted to adopt you?
No,
Right, when he hopped on a freight train with some
Yeah.
friends, and they went up north and never found her.
well, when I went through, I was aiming for, I had done all my research, aiming for Willow River, because that's where south of the reservation, that's where she lived. And it stopped me, this boxcar stopped at every town except Willow River.
And so you went right by it.
And it would take a swing over a big bridge into Wisconsin and went to Superior, and it parked there for the night. So it was cool up there, so by the lake, you know. So we went into the another boxcar. I found some paper, high sheets of paper that they use to cover the floors and stuff when you put grain or something in there. And so we rolled up in this stuff. Just started on one end and rolled up and tucked in the end. Had a little bank, something to keep warm on. But there's some railroad workers that saw us go into that thing, and they took it. They come up there and they made us get out of there, and they took us down to the police station, and somebody had to be called from home to make a dead opinion of what to do with us. So he wasn't very happy about that. He said, throw him in the back of the.
So they locked them in jail for the weekend.
Well,
These little boys.
there were 3 cells in the whole in Superior. Of course, they've got a big jail now, I think, but it was just a little thing. Nobody was there at night. They just went home. They locked us up and went home.
Left them alone. No one else was around.
And
They were alone. Like wasn't the whole weekend?
there was no.
But they brought you food like a couple times a day, right? Somebody would come.
There was no. There was no blankets or anything there. They just had these little ticks, you know, double
The bunk
bunk
beds.
there. And it was cold in there. The window was broken. You see it through the bars, it was all broken. And so we hollered and nobody came. And so finally we took the top tick, put it on the bottom tick, and we both plowed between them.
To stay warm. But they did bring you food like once or twice a day, right? But then the rest of the time they were like locked in there totally alone. It's all in the book.
Dale said that's the last time I want to sleep with you.
How old were you when that happened?
This lady said, how old were you when that happened, when you ran away on the freight train?
13, yeah. And we're getting to be young men, you know. But it was, and they weren't very friendly to policemen, but when the social worker came and to pick us up from Duluth, he had to come to Wisconsin to pick us up, found out where we were from, and they sent us down on a train with the conductor in charge of us to St. Paul, and then social worker from this orphanage came up there and picked us up at the train station. So I realized we caused them a little trouble during the war, you know, but we weren't thinking of that. We were thinking of getting out of that place.
Yeah. Should we maybe wrap it up? Does anyone have one more question or?
What did they do to you when you got back to the orphanage? Did they punish you for leaving?
Well, I was worried about it, but they didn't. They restricted us to Wednesday night movies and stuff. We couldn't go to them, but but they kind of forgot about it, and so and it wasn't long after that I was put on farm indenture. So, well, thank you for your.
Yes, actually.
Have you one more?
You're all welcome to stay.
One more question.
Stay and speak with Peter if he's willing to stay for a while. He did bring books. Loretta and Curtis brought CDs. You're welcome to purchase before you leave. There's plenty of coffee and cookies left, so you don't need to be in a hurry to leave. But this concludes our program. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank you so
us.
much, everyone, for coming. I'm sure you agree with me that this
So if you have more questions, Peter will be right back by his books.
Hey,
Try to stay here.
you ran down some of your Chippewa heritage and family. Have you met them, or
Have you met some of the Indian side of your family?
Yeah, quite a few of them.
how about the Finnish?
I've met them too.
Oh, okay.
I looked everybody up, and in fact, we visit both of them. That's my Finnish cousin who lives in Upper Peninsula yet, and I saved her when she was 17 years old. I saved her from drowning.
Oh.
Yeah, she was drowning, and I went out and saved her.
Oh my gosh, I never heard of that. Wow.
See, you learned another thing.
After the Korean War, he finally found out where his grandmother was, and the day he actually got there, the day she was buried.
Oh dear.
You
Oh
went to the funeral of your grandmother.
Yeah.
oh my.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sure,
I can't tell you how many times There's amazing people already.
Thank you for coming. I am glad you came too. Thanks for taking the time. Thank you.